Welcome to the Oral Systemic Connections Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tom Larkin, here to explore how your oral health connects to your overall well-being. From heart disease to diabetes, your mouth is the gateway to your body. Let's dive in. Welcome to Oral Systemic Connections. I'm Dr. Tom Larkin, where I introduce you to some amazing individuals. Today, I'm going to introduce you to someone who is the hardest working individual that I think I know right now. He is the CEO of Biosure North America, and I'm adding him to the stage. Darren Simmons, welcome to Oral Systemic Connections.
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. It's good to be here with you guys.
Yeah, so let me give you my backstory on Ozone, because there's a journey, how we met, and it was just all a process. And all goes back to COVID, that wonderful period of time that was kind of strange. April 2020, I had a meeting. It was going to be my first live training meeting. It got canceled, okay? And so what happened was I just instinctively knew when the issue of aerosols came up. I've talked about aerosols for a long time because I've trained a lot of team members on how to use a microscope chairside to look at bacteria, right? And I knew inherently that aerosols, if you have water in your bottles, the reason why when we would train people and I would test the hygienists, their microbiome was always terrible. Some were like awful because they were spraying all that crap in their face. So to me, it was super logical that one of the solutions at the COVID period, where all of a sudden the aerosols were more dangerous, was ozone water. And I knew that because of Dr. Rachel Riley, who you've met. She's a holistic dentist, and I kind of knew it peripherally. So what do? I go to the internet and I start to do my homework and start to search. What did I find? Not much. You kind of know. So the websites were pretty sketchy. There were, dentistry wasn't very well represented, 4 or 5 years ago as far as like ozone. The other thing too is that ozone gas and ozone water were kind of coupled together, and I just wanted the water, right? So I went and bought ozone generator at home, oxygen tank, learned how to make it. I just went through the whole process. And I've got one point, I don't know if I've told you this story, but in the spirit of transparency, and that was kind of a strange, there was a strange period of unknown. And I would take the mail that would come and I would put it in a vinyl bag and I would fill it full of ozone gas for about 10 minutes. And then I felt like my mail was safe. Now that was a very short period of time. Okay. But I had the best smelling mail of all time, and it was very clean. Okay. So everything kind of progressed, and I deployed it in some offices here in Lexington. And then there were individuals at my meeting from Australia that canceled, and they reached back out to me and said, Dr. Larkin, would you do some training in Australia virtually? And I said, yeah, I think this whole thing of having a learning platform is going to be part of the CE in the future. So I took some time and developed this learning platform, and I'm training dentists in like Australia that fall. And one of the things that I found, so obviously I'm wanting to know their protocols, whatever, and they're using like ozone water a lot, aqueous ozone, except they got it out of the tap. And I was like, and so, here we're making it through this really arduous process of bubbling it through an aquarium stone. It took a lot of time. It wasn't really powerful, and there were capacity limits, right? So I thought, this is really interesting. So I started, I've learned a lot in Australia, and that was an area. So the name of the company was Biosure. And I reached out to you. So tell me how you recollect how we met, because I was pretty persistent.
You're very persistent, and I'd had a couple of inquiries, and it was in the height of COVID when a lot of things were happening. It was a little bit of an unusual time, especially around communications and engaging folks. And there was, you had reached out to us, I think, a couple of times, and were really anxious to get in touch with us. And it actually routed through our headquarters in Taiwan. It came back to me, and I reached out to you. And it was, as I recall, it was an extremely exciting conversation. Very a lot of common ground and interest and excitement around the technology and the science. And, the rest has been history. We've had a nice 5-year run now
Yeah.
of working together and bringing more people into the adoption, which is really our mission, is to drive the adoption of ozone as a standard for disinfection and antiseptic use.
Wow. I 5 years. I mean, time flies by. I mean, that's an old cliche, but boy, that's for sure. Okay. So before we get into that, can you share with my audience a little bit about your career at Coca-Cola? Okay. So you're an engineer, you got some background, and talk about that transition. You had reached a point and something came along or this came along and it made sense to you. Can you kind of tell my audience a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. The relevance to this audience and this group is my father and mother are both in the medical profession. My dad's a dentist, mother's a registered nurse. My brother's a dentist. They both practice and are successful implant dentists, do a lot of surgery. So I grew up in the medical field, specifically around dentistry. So I'm very familiar with it. But I broke ranks and went engineering and been at it for about 30 years, a lot around development, innovation, core and applied research. So I'm used to looking 10 to 15 years out at new technologies and figuring out how to bring them into immediate application and value to customers or end users of products. I spent most of my career in the beverage industry. I did work for Coca-Cola, half of that career leading global research, development, and innovation for cold drink equipment. What was a little bit unusual about it, and what most people don't know about Coke, is that they do a lot around environmental sustainability, whether it's water, packaging, ingredients, et cetera, and specifically around appliances or the cold drink equipment. Coke's the largest end user of refrigerated equipment in the world. And we bought more equipment in a year than anybody else, over 1.5 million pieces of equipment on an annual basis. So there's a lot of pressure on Coke to do well with the environment by reducing our carbon footprint. So I was charged with leading a technical organization for the research, development, and commercialization of alternative refrigerants that were environmentally friendly and natural, as well as reducing energy consumption, et cetera. And so the results of that work over a 10-year period led to the equivalent of taking nearly 1 million cars off the road every year in terms of the positive impact that we've had in the environment as a result of that work. And that's an ongoing, that's something that pays forward. So I've worked for other companies doing a lot around new product development and innovation. And in 2019, I decided it was time to either scratch that entrepreneurial itch and do it on my own or continue working for corporate America. So I was actually going into doing more beverage equipment with a very close and dear friend of mine who has broad and extensive manufacturing capacity. And 2 days before we were set to sign our agreement, he said, there's a company I've worked with and invested in over the years, and I just went through a business review, and you need to come meet them. And so I was introduced to Gavin Shu, who's the managing director of BES Groups globally. His father founded the company, and 15 minutes into it, I forgot everything I ever knew about beverage equipment and wanted to learn everything I didn't know about ozone. So you'll find as we talk more during this session that the technology is very special and unique. And at least in my experience, easily one of the top 2 or 3 technologies, really revolutionary and groundbreaking technologies that I've ever experienced or been a part of. So we committed to commercializing it in North America with the mission of making ozone the standard of disinfection and antiseptic. So we take a very long-term sustainable view to commercializing this product. We didn't capitalize on the fear and concern around the pandemic. We stayed very true to our core values, and are quite happy with the progress we're making. So
the title of this podcast is it time for ozone? Oh, and I have breaking news that I need to tell you about. So as of March 1st, Shake Shack, what's the name of the hamburger place? Shake Shack. Steak Shack is frying their French fries in beef tallow as of March 1st. Okay. So there's change in the wind, because when I was doing my research on ozone, I was trying to figure out why it's used all over the world, but not here. And I had some suspicions about, suppression of technology or whatever. And so, yeah, it was used a lot in Italy. And and you're familiar with how it's used globally. And I couldn't understand it because it's such a logical, common sense thing. I consider it I use the term holistic and that it's non-chemical. It's very effective. We're going to go into the science in just a sec. And I'm just going to kind of bring you through. Let me put this slide up here first. And I'm going to have you explain a little bit of the science. So what I want you to explain to the audience, the three most basic things are parts per million, and that's a measurement of concentration, and then the concept of half-life. So when aqueous ozone water is made, it's wanting to degrade almost immediately. It's O3 and it wants to go back to O2. And then the third thing I want you to comment on is water temperature. Water temperature has an effect on half-life. So what this means in the dental office, and this was all stuff that I was trying to put together, it was very difficult to put together, was we want to put it in the hygiene bottles. Okay. So how long does it have? Is it effectiveness? Correct. And the factor of that is parts per million, temperature of the water, whatever. So can you kind of walk through that for me and kind of explain that whole thing?
Sure. So just for the folks that are tuned into the science, ozone is just simply a triatomic molecule of oxygen. We have two oxygen atoms with a strong double bond, a third atom with a weak single bond. This gives the molecule a electrical charge. And for the layperson, we like to say that this molecule of oxygen electrocutes bacteria and viruses when it comes into contact with them. Other stuff like chemicals, yeast, other oxidized components or compounds that can be oxidized. But the main thing is it electrocutes it. This is an electrical process it uses to kill bacteria and destroy or inactivate viruses. It's very reactive, as Tom mentions, which means it has a half-life. It'll react with itself with other ozone molecules and quickly decompose to oxygen molecules. So the great thing about it is it doesn't leave a harmful residue behind. There is no chemical residue or anything remaining after it's been used other than the dead stuff that it killed, the dead matter. But the downside is it has a half-life. So you can't bottle and package ozone and expect to ship it across the country and have somebody that can let it sit on the shelf for 3 months and use it. You have to be able to make it on the spot and use it. And so that half-life we refer to is around 25 minutes at room temperature. So this means that if you start with a concentration of 10 parts per million, within 25 minutes, it will reduce to 5 parts per million, then again to 2.5, and then again to 1.25, and so on. So you really want to use it within, if you start with 10 parts per million, you really want to use it within an hour and a half or so for it to be effective.
Okay. So in the dental hygiene, you were talking about changing the bottles a couple of times in before noon, 2 times in the morning. So that 10 parts per million is really important because your CDU, which we're going to show in a minute, I couldn't make 10 parts per million manually. No. Okay. There was just no way to approach that. And that's why this, your process is revolutionary, that it can get to that concentration. Hygienists start the day, fill the bottles. The other thing I recommend too, just as a standard of care, is for the doctors before they're doing a major surgical procedure, or if you're doing something like that, start with a fresh bottle, right? If you're doing a surgery that might be 90 minutes or whatever, it's in the best interest of everybody, but it's just, it's a perfect thing. Okay. Now let's go to the science and the testing, and you're going to have to explain a little bit about, this gets pretty deep kind of, but what you're going to explain is this works, right? Efficacy.
It does. The EPA sets some very good guidelines around what's considered disinfection strength or even hospital grade disinfectant. So we deal a lot with what we refer to as 5 and 6 log reductions. 5 log is simply 99.999% reduction of pathogens. Well, in order to demonstrate that to a level that it really doesn't leave any remaining, you have to start out with a very high level of contamination in terms of testing. So what we have here is a summary table of testing that we've done with recognized independent world-class third-party organizations to test the efficacy of this product. In order to do so, we have to start with a fairly high level of contamination. This particular test was done in suspension. It wasn't embodied in a well-established or developed biofilm, but it's really intended to show what the kinetic reaction time is between ozone and these bugs. So here we have a list of Staphylococcus aureus, Escherichia coli, E. coli as we know it, Salmonella, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Candida albicans, and MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. You can see here within 15 seconds, there was no detectable level of these pathogens once they were introduced to ozone at a 3.7 parts per million concentration. The unit that Tom referenced earlier, that we'll show you shortly, produces 10 parts per million. So it has 3 times that capacity or concentration of ozone, which is important when you want to when you consider the working life that you want to have to be able to be effective with during your treatment or application. You'll see that there is one with E. coli that is less than 10. That just happened to be the test that they ran, the type of test they ran. They would not list it as not detected or as 0, just simply less than 10 to account for anything that they missed or weren't able to see or count. But if you calculate it, it still puts it at over 99.99%. And we know that E. coli is highly susceptible to ozone. It's very easy to kill with ozone.
What if your role as a dental professional could go far beyond teeth? What if you weren't just treating mouths, but saving lives? Preventive dental care is evolving rapidly. The oral microbiome, salivary diagnostics, lasers, biofilm therapy, they aren't just tools, they are the future of healthcare. They're turning hygienists and dentists into leaders in disease prevention and whole body wellness. The question is, will you lead this change or be left behind? This is your moment. My name is Dr. Tom Larkin, and as a founder of Proactive Oral Wellness, my mission is simple: to equip you with the tools and processes to transform your practice and your patients' lives. That's why I'm inviting you to join me and some of the nation's leading experts in Lexington, Kentucky on April 26th for the Future of Dental Hygiene 5, The Blueprint. We will unpack the framework of the wellness-centered practice, new patient onboarding from a variety of really unique practitioners, specific preventive protocols, medical dental collaborative communication platforms, AI and prevention, and the revolutionary products that are bringing so much hope to this movement. And my podcast listeners get an exclusive offer by entering promo code POW. That stands for Proactive Oral Wellness. Every event that I've held so far has sold out over a month in advance. So reserve your spot early at oralsystemicmastery.com. Hope to see you there.
Okay, so one of the things that in my learning process was there are different types of, there's a corona discharge method, ultraviolet, and then your technology. Can you kind of walk through that?
Sure. If you look at the pictures, the little images at the top, there are 3 main sources of oxygen. In order to make ozone, you have to have a source of oxygen. And so the 3 primary sources available to us are water, air, and oxygen bottles. We really don't have oxygen bottles listed here, but it would fall in the middle column around corona discharge. And that's the type of system that Dr. Larkin was referencing earlier when he was making it at the onset of the pandemic. We generate ours from water. And the reason this is important is that water is a fairly available and infinite source of oxygen, but you have to electrically split water molecules apart to liberate the oxygen and then reconstitute it into ozone. And then we leave it dissolved in water. So what that results in is a very high purity water, high concentration of ozone in the water that can then be applied in a very stable manner. It's instant high purity, continuous high purity. So we have a continuous production that's available. It's consistent output under different conditions. You don't have to worry about trying to make it or bubble it and do these different manual processes. No nitrogen oxides. And that's something I really want to emphasize on this slide. If we go to this middle column of corona discharge method with air and ultraviolet light method with air, air is 78% nitrogen. So you either have to have a very sophisticated process of removing nitrogen from the air or contend with the fact that through the process of generating ozone, nitrogen oxide, NOx, like the pollution out of combustion engines, nitrous oxide, nitrous acid, and nitric acid are produced during this process, which become corrosive. They'll shift the pH of the water. and they're potentially carcinogenic. There's a lot of debate in the field about whether or not they're carcinogenic. Japan recognizes it as such. The U.S. isn't necessarily there yet, but still, it's not good and healthy. So really, there's been most of the negative information that you see around ozone is typically that produced from corona discharge method with air. And that's not to be confused with corona discharge using oxygen gas like Dr. Larkin was referring to. That's fine. That's pure. You don't have the nitrogen oxides or the nitrogen byproducts, but it is a very low purity. So when you're saying he was having a hard time getting a high concentration of ozone into the water, that's because he was dealing with a very high ratio of oxygen to ozone that was limiting the dissolution, as well as just simply the process of being able to dissolve it more effectively into water. So what we end up with our EOG technology is a very, very elegant solution for connecting a water supply to a piece of equipment, plugging it in, and having a high concentration of aqueous ozone available to you that is a very powerful disinfectant or antiseptic, is available on demand, and is free of any nitrogen byproducts, which would be a problem for you.
Yeah, so that was one of the things in my learning curve process was the corrosiveness of the corona discharge. You would get some rust and some stuff, and that kind of went away when we switched over to the Biosure stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to walk through your existing technology or existing models. This is an inline. You've got three different, I guess the difference in the numbers is the capacity, right?
That's right.
So this is a smaller that you might put this. And so that actually, you just plug it into the wall. There's a transformer or whatever. And this would be perfect for like a sink or something like that, where the water that would come out would be ozonated. What parts per million? You said 0.1 to 2 parts per million delivery?
Yeah, so this is pretty important as we go through these, and Dr. Larkin walks us through it. I want to impress upon everybody, especially for those that may go out and just look at what the landscape looks like for different products. I would encourage you to always really dial in and focus on what different products specify in terms of their milligram per hour output, which is the amount of ozone that they produce in milligrams per hour.
Okay.
And then their ppm, parts per million, which is also the same as milligrams per liter concentration. They're both, the variable between these two is the flow rate of the water that goes through them. Based on the milligram per hour output you have and the flow rate, that gives you a yield of how much has been actually delivered in concentration by water. If you do not find a piece of technology or product that has this information provided, ask for it. And if they still won't do it, be wary. It is difficult to effectively use and employ ozone in any kind of application without understanding this information.
A really exciting application of this is washing machine, laundry. So tell a story about that. I mean, as far as not being able, not having to use soap, have a fresh smell. Washing machines are an issue for sure.
Yeah, so my wife and I first got married, I thought I'd do a nice thing and wash a white dress and a red dress together, and she got two beautiful pink dresses. I was banned from the laundry room. With ozone laundry, I'm back in business. So basically what you can do is you eliminate Clorox or chlorine bleach from the wash cycle, first of all, because ozone, as an oxidant, is 50 times more powerful than chlorine and works 3,000 times faster at killing or oxidizing any kind of bacteria or virus. The second thing you can do is cut your detergent in half, your detergent use in half. The third thing is you can eliminate hot water. Ozone activates the detergent the same as hot water does, and it also relaxes and opens the fibers in the fabric like hot water does. The fourth thing you can do, which was kind of rough on me, is that you can mix and match lights and darks now without having to worry about the color bleed between them. And then it also extends the life of the fabrics by 30 to 40%. So when you properly size one of these ozone systems for a laundry, the quality of the fabrics and the linens coming out of the laundry are going to be significantly different and higher quality than performance than what you've experienced in the past with chlorine-based systems.
That's very cool. Very cool. All right, let's talk about the tumbler. This is very cool. The concept of portable ozone generator. So you and I know Dr. Jason Pang in Australia. He was one of the first dentists that I trained. this was kind of like standard procedure for him. I mean, he had patients like we might send a patient home with a water pick. He sends them home with an ozone tumbler. He's got lots and lots of case studies that I've seen where this was the therapeutic stuff that they used at home, right? So this has the ability to not only have a portable generation at home, but also surface disinfection. So one of the things that you've done at my courses, which is just so incredibly powerful, is you have a swab device where you can look at surface contamination. And what do they call that, an ATP meter?
Yes, that's an ATP meter. We actually use the Hygiene Ensure Touch system.
Yeah. And so you'll take somebody's phone, which is like, wow, you want to talk about something making an impression? Yeah, can I have your phone for a second? Take a swab, put it in there, and it's like, oh man, phones are just disgusting.
They're pretty rough.
And then spray on there, and then retest, and the rest is history. So very compelling. It's very compelling. So
I think it's important to add, and we haven't touched on it yet. The SDS, or material safety data sheet for ozonated water, reads just like regular water. It doesn't burn, it doesn't sting, it doesn't irritate, doesn't have any kind of inflammatory response on your skin, or it's very friendly for surfaces. But also, again, reference the table with the levels of kill for some pretty nasty bugs. It's very powerful. So that's something that's very unique and special about this aqueous ozone that we're able to produce, is that it's very friendly and easy to use. From a regulatory standpoint, the FDA has previously approved it as GRAS acceptance for food products, actually disinfecting foods as well as food contact surfaces. EPA has it approved as an alternative oxidant for water treatment. So 90% of bottled water in North America is processed with ozone. More than 40% of municipalities treat their water systems with ozone for disinfection. Las Vegas, in particular, 1.25 billion gallons a day. They treat their water with ozone out of Lake Mead for parasite control. The last 5 Summer Olympics all used ozone in the swimming pools as opposed to chlorine and salt. So it's a lot more popular in use than we know. It's just behind the scene and kind of an unsung hero in a lot of places.
Right. All right. Here's the workhorse. The CDU, the compact disinfection unit. Most people have this in their sterilization areas. This is where you go to get your bottles filled on demand. Super, super convenient. Fill the bottle, hook it up to your chair, up to 10 parts per million. That's kind of the magic that, I don't think you can achieve any other way that I know of.
No.
Yeah. So speaks for itself. That's been a real breakthrough in most offices for sure.
Yeah, it's a small unit. It's about the size of a backpack. So it sits on the countertop next to the sink. You connect it to a water supply, a drain, and you plug it in. It's very simple. It takes about 10 minutes to install. And you can install it with regular tap water, or you can go all the way to full deionized water if you want ultra pure water supplying it. And you have 10 parts per million on demand. Typically, we don't ever see devices off the shelf that are able to produce more than 1 to 1.5 parts per million of dissolved ozone, and especially at this level of purity. So it is definitely a standout. It's the workhorse, as you call it, for sure.
Nice. Space sanitizing. I love this. Okay. You have a video on the website that kind of shows the swabbing before and after. This is a unit that puts out a fine mist, and this is for like surface, would you just call surface disinfection, or nooks and cranny kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah, in rooms and airs and spaces for surfaces where you may not necessarily be able to get to them, fabrics, linens, etc. Yeah. It'll put ozone through a room. It'll keep it at a level below OSHA's acceptable limits with people in the room. Has built-in intelligence that knows when someone's left the room, and we'll put it into a boost mode, taking it up to a higher level so that you can destroy viruses or bacteria that may be floating around in the room that you want to address. Odor deodorization is incredible. It's extremely powerful. If you recall earlier when we talked about nitrogen oxides, you can buy simple systems off the internet or at different stores that you set in a room and turn it on and plug it in. an ozone generator. Those are making ozone from air, and they have the nitrogen byproducts that go along with it. So those residuals are in the room and you're breathing them when you
Wow.
re-enter the room. All of our technology, including this device, uses water to generate ozone. So we're using a very pure oxygen source. We don't have any nitrogen byproduct being produced with that ozone, which makes it very clean and safer to use than those other products.
There are a lot of dentists doing pretty complex surgical procedures. A lot of dental offices have surgical suites now because of
Mhm.
implants and such. And well, this is just an absolute no-brainer for a surgical suite. Just
Well, I didn't put it in our presentation yet, but we are about to release another one that's even more powerful than this. It'll be the most powerful product on the market, and it's an advanced oxidation system that uses a different type of catalyst with ozone to make hydroxyl radicals that can be used in recirculation while people are in the space, because it doesn't deliver ozone directly to the space. It uses ozone to generate hydroxyl radicals, which will zap anything that comes through it. And we're about 3 to 4 times higher volume and capacity than the best product on the market. So that one's a very exciting one that's coming up. We wouldn't necessarily recommend it from an economic standpoint to waiting rooms or anything like that. But for a surgical suite or someplace where you have a very sensitive environment, absolutely, this will be the way to go.
nice. Okay. New things to the market. This is pretty exciting. We've talked a lot about this offline. Kind of walk me through water purification and how this works with your system.
So this was actually born out of walking through the back door of my brother's office periodically to visit him and stumbling over gallon jugs of distilled water sitting on the floor. And then by people installing our CDU and other products, and you're really needing a plug and play solution that would handle the wide range of water qualities that exist across the US and either territories and markets outside of the US. The range of pressures, water flow, water condition, and quality. I was in Mexico City last week. A lot of the water that are supplied to those clinics start, in open tanks on the roof. So they have to go through a pretty sophisticated process of water treatment and can't use that water during treatment. This system will produce by itself ultra pure water. And then we've added an additional feature to it that deionizes the water. And we looked at all the sterilization equipment on the market, and we took all of their requirements or specifications for water and ensured that this system would produce water at a level of purity that will meet their requirements, so that we can use that now in sterilization equipment as opposed to distilled water out of gallon jugs or other distillation processes. It will also connect directly to our CDU. So between this and the CDU, you'll have the best, highest quality, pure ozonated water that you could possibly get. And then secondly, you'll have a side stream or a side supply that's available to use in any other equipment that would normally require distilled water. This will be distilled equivalent. But
Wow.
we're pretty excited about this, and this one will be available in Q2 of this year.
Very cool.
We're starting to take some pre-orders and pre-commitments now for folks that are installing our equipment and want to make sure that they get on the list to get it.
Cool. Ozone towel dispenser. Talk to me about that. That looks awesome.
Yeah, so we patented that last year. I went through the whole patenting process, but I hadn't really seen the actual prototype yet. And I was happy about it. When I we had a global meeting in Bangkok, Thailand last month. And when I saw this product in person, I thought, okay, this is going to be a game changer. I show it with reusable towels, which isn't really appropriate for a dental or medical office. They need to be single-use towels.
Okay.
But this is a device that has a reservoir of water in it with our built-in ozone generation equipment into it, and generates ozonated water on demand. Has a spraying system inside of it that'll spray the top 1, 2, 3 towels, so that you can open it and grab an ozonated towel at up to 1.6 part per million, which will give you disinfectant quality ozone for surfaces. So you have a towel, you grab it, you're able to use it. 1.2 to 1.6 is kind of the magical number for surface disinfection. We don't yet have standards or procedures in place in the US through the EPA to be able to certify ozonated equipment to a disinfection standard. Their guidance is to rely on the manufacturer and the user to make sure that they're using it appropriately. However, the European Union, we've spent several $1,000,000 in well over 7 years with other industry partners developing with the European Union in collaboration a certification standard that gives the ability to recognize surface disinfection, what the required concentrations and contact times are for a variety of applications and contaminants. And then a process for actually certifying manufacturers and equipment as having been qualified to meet those standards. So, we've been successful on all fronts with the European Union. It's a great reference for us. This product will be deemed approved and certified for surface disinfection by European Union standards. And so we'll use that as a reference. But of course, in all of our products, we spend a lot of time with practices as much as they need, making sure that they're implementing this appropriately and getting the results that they need. And we always recommend some auditing or spot checks to make sure that they're using it adequately and getting the results and efficacy that they expect.
That's cool. Very cool. Okay, now this is the air disinfection system.
Okay,
yeah.
I did sneak it in. I did sneak it in. So this is the one I referred to as earlier. Advanced oxidation process is even more powerful. It produces oxidants in the form of hydroxyl radicals, and they're even more powerful than ozone. The nice thing about it, though, is it decomposes ozone so that you can actually recirculate air in occupied spaces and not have to worry about delivering ozone, which might become objectionable to the occupants. And it'll just absolutely destroys anything out there. I think it's 14 trillion hydroxyl radicals per minute. I think the next best one is 3 or 4. So we have about 4 times the best unit on the market. This one is going to be a game changer. This product is the first of many that'll go across a platform. We've secured issued patents for it last year. We're pretty excited about this one.
So I have experience with this type of device going back to COVID. I've got a vacation rental on my property, and I thought that was a partial solution to what I needed to do when guests would come and this and that and the other. So I had this commercial unit gas, and I would put it in, and I would put it on a timer, and then I would put like a caution sign on the doors just to be sure that, man, do not walk in here when this thing is on, because I only did it one time. So the whole thing about ozone gas is that it's extremely irritating to the respiratory tract. And I don't know if you've ever, by chance, have ever taken a whiff of it, but I've only done it once, and you will not forget it. You will cough like a crazy person for a half an hour. It's, just with one really good whiff of it, right?
That's right. It'll get you if you get it in high enough concentrations. All of our aqueous products are highly dissolved. You can smell it. Our ability to detect ozone through smell is about 0.01 ppm in air, which is different than aqueous. It's a higher ratio of ppm in air is a higher ratio to water. But our ability to detect it is very, very low. Low levels. So our ability to detect it is very high. We'll detect it far well before it's becoming an issue. And if you do inhale gaseous ozone at a high enough concentration, you'll know it. You'll cough. You need to move. You need to hold your breath or whatever and get out of there. But it's no different. People ask me about it, and it's really no different than ammonia or chlorine-based cleaners. If you inhale higher concentrations of chlorine gas or ammonia gas, those are even worse as far as toxicity and effects go. But when they're dissolved in solution, they become a very effective disinfectant or sanitizer. So very similar. All of our gaseous products have protections built in to limit the likelihood of that happening. That ozone generator is still made from water. So it's still clean and pure. Okay. It is not being made from air. We have the ability to turn ozone on and off. So we can either deliver ozone to the space when it's unoccupied in high concentrations, or we can deliver hydroxyl radicals, when it is occupied. And no need to refill that one. We actually have a patented process where we're dehumidifying the air as it comes through, collecting that condensate and using that for our water. So it's very efficient and effective from a maintenance standpoint.
Well, it's a great thing to do for a rental property as far as like odors. I mean, if you ever had anybody smoke in a property or any kind of lingering, I mean, it leaves a really fresh. You just feel like it's clean, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't mask the odors. It actually oxidizes the volatile organic compounds that are being produced from whatever's causing the odors. And then it'll also go and attack those at the core, those contaminants that are generating those VOCs. So it actually kills it. It doesn't mask it.
Very cool. Okay. Any other new developments, things that you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned earlier in the call that in the session that we're taking a long-term sustainable view. We get asked a lot of questions, what is the FDA's position or the EPA's, et cetera. And I touched on that earlier. For us to openly market and make claims in dental water lines, we need to make sure that the FDA has reviewed it and agrees with us and has evaluated our organization, our process, our commercial activity. We're ISO certified to medical device standards, so we're certified to produce medical devices as a manufacturing company. Aqueous ozone has been previously approved for dental water lines, for instance. So we're actually going through the 510K approval process, which will give us the ability to openly market and make claims about using ozonated water in dental water lines. Our testing has demonstrated the ability to eliminate up to 6.5, I think we were 6.5 log kill on biofilm. So that means we had to start with about 200 or 320 million colony forming units of Pseudomonas aeruginosa per centimeter squared, which was delivering 200 million CFUs per milliliter Pseudomonas in the effluent water out of the dental water lines. You guys in dental are trying to stay below 200. We were at 200 million. And not only did we kill the bacteria, the planktonic bacteria that was free in the water, but we actually disintegrated the biofilm and reduced it by, I think, 6.7 log reduction, which is very unusual for most treatment systems. Typically, you have to go through and shock lines to get rid of the biofilm. Most systems that are used today just simply kill the bacteria that's free in the water, but don't necessarily resolve the biofilm without going through a very specialized shocking process. So we're going through that process just to make sure that we're aligned and can demonstrate with regulatory bodies that we're doing what we say we do. In the meantime, we encourage everyone to test their lines on a routine basis. Right. Make sure that if you're using it that way, that you're using it effectively, and we can help with that.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be just a matter of time before it's a standard of care in dentistry. It's just an absolute, to me, it's just a no-brainer. Once I discovered what you were doing, you've been a regular presenter at my annual meeting.
We look forward to it every year.
Yeah. It's a great collection. It's kind of funny because it just became a meeting of innovation, new things. And so April 26th in Lexington is our next meeting. And, another really interesting collection of people where we're really trying to move the needle in healthcare and just make things better. And you're definitely a part of making things better. And I'm so glad that I hunted you down.
You did. Well, it's a lot of fun. It's the collaboration is incredible. The follow on and the references and the getting the word out continues on even after the session. So it's been great for us. We're very happy and proud to be a part of it, and look forward to seeing a lot of new a lot of familiar faces as well as a lot of new faces at the next one.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Darren, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. You guys take care.
All right.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of Oral Systemic Connections podcast, where we prove every week that your smile is way more powerful than you ever imagined. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button, share it with someone who deserves to know these jaw-dropping truths, and leave us a review to help us spread the word. And remember, every smile you care for is an investment in your whole body health. Keep smiling, keep thriving, and I'll see you next time.